Thank you. Honorable members, before we proceed, I would like to remind you that the virtual mini plenary is deemed to be in the precinct of Parliament and constitute a meeting of the National Assembly for debating purposes only. In addition to the rules of visual sittings, the rules of the National Assembly, including the rules of the debate, apply. Members enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Assembly. Members should equally note that anything said in the visual platform is deemed to have been said to the House and may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when recognized to speak. This is because the mics are very sensitive and will pick up noise which might disturb the attention of other members. When recognized to speak, please unmute your microphone and connect your video. Members may make use of the icons on the bar at the bottom of their screens, which has an option that allows a member to put up his or her hand to raise points of order. The Secretariat will assist in alerting the chairperson to members requesting to speak. When using the visual system, members are urged to refrain or desist from unnecessary points of order or interjections. We shall now proceed, honorable members, to the order, which is debate on vote number 6, International Relations and Cooperation, Appropriation Bill. I now recognize the Honorable the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
Thank you, Chairperson. Deputy Minister Mashiko Dlamini, Deputy Minister Botus, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Supra Mahumapelo, honorable members, members of the executive and guests joining us online. Our country, South Africa, has continued to conduct its foreign relations in accordance with the values and principles set out in our Constitution. We strive as South Africa to be a positive contributor to the global family of nations and to promote our aspirations for a peaceful, prosperous, and united Africa in a just and equitable world. These are difficult goals to pursue, challenged as they are by complex shifts in global relations and unprecedented global instability. Some believe we are at an inflection point in history and that we have an opportunity to reshape and rethink global institutions and mechanisms. As honorable members would know, COVID-19 has been a challenge like no other since the end of the Second World War, revealing our shared vulnerability and connectedness. The shadow of COVID-19 is still with us as we debate this budget vote. The pandemic exposed poverty and inequality in our own society and throughout the global community. We need, as South Africa, to continue to ensure that we respond effectively and to ensure that we prepare for future crises and pandemics of this kind. We've been hard hit by the effects of this disease, but we did respond speedily and effectively as a nation and as government, and this led to the saving of many lives, and we need to build on that foundation. The challenging crises that have affected South Africa since 2019 impacted negatively on our economy and led to continuing low growth and inadequate productivity. Our government has had to adjust budgets and redirect funds toward the COVID-19 response and to respond to the effects of the riots we experienced in parts of Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in 2021. These changes affected the resources available to us as DIRCO and various government departments in this new financial year. We have been allocated just over 6.6 billion rands for this financial year, which is an extremely modest increase of around 1.3% from the 2020-21 allocation. As we have said previously, our department requires greater allocation of resources in order to carry out its assigned work in the 116 diplomatic missions in 102 countries in which our country has representation. However, we are aware that South Africa is constrained in terms of the availability of public finances, and we have committed as DIRCO that we will ensure use of this allocation in an efficient and robust manner. I'm pleased to report to honorable members that we've made progress in advancing our foreign policy agenda in the past year and have worked hard at consolidating the progress achieved by our country in the past 2 decades plus of freedom. We are committed to using our foreign policy to contribute to a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world, as is stated in Goal 7 of our medium-term strategic framework. Our country has showed this commitment through implementing a comprehensive strategic framework in combating the pandemic and its effects, and in sharing our programs and our experiences with the entire continent, as well as others throughout the world. We've also used our participation in the G20, the G7, and BRICS to secure practical actions to address the fallout from the pandemic. We were able to achieve important outcomes through this. One of these was agreement that multilateral financial institutions.
Oh, Minister, we are missing you. Is the minister
implement a year-long debt standstill to provide liquidity for the economies of low and middle-income countries, as well as funding for businesses that experience losses in the community. This is
I've lost the minister. I don't know whether it's my connectivity or that of the minister. Honorable members.
All of us.
The minister.
Minister is off.
It's all of us, Chair.
All of you.
When he comes back, advise her to switch.
Be the minister.
Pardon me?
House Chair, perhaps the ministers should be advised to switch off her video to allow and give the bandwidth.
Actually, let's try to switch off our videos, all of us, so that maybe she's able to reconnect. Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, we have lost you completely.
Chair, is there no one from the department that can just take over? I mean, are we now going to wait for the minister? I mean, you have deputies, let them take over.
But it was unexpected that this would happen, Honorable Member. Let's give Minister 1 or 2 minutes, please.
I am back. I'm back, Honorable.
Okay. Sorry about
members.
that, Honorable Minister. We lost you completely.
Yes, no. The deputy ministers cannot present my speech. They will present their own speeches. In 2021, Chairperson, the UN Secretary General gave the global community new hope when he presented a global vision of inclusive and transformed multilateralism. He proposed adoption of a common agenda for humanity that will see us address climate change, conflict, poverty, and insecurity in a manner promoting inclusion, shared development, and equality. He proposed that the United Nations and its institutions would serve as the strategic multilateral body supporting the globe in acting on this common agenda. The 2021 General Assembly enthusiastically welcomed the Secretary General's initiative and committed to his common agenda. We thus began 2022 with renewed hope for the global community. The Russia-Ukraine war has severely eroded that hope and has divided the world once again and diverted us from the Secretary General's common agenda. Despite our calls for a ceasefire and for UN-led negotiations, the war rages on, with millions displaced and thousands maimed and killed. We remain steadfast in our belief that war benefits no one and that all efforts should focus on peaceful settlement of all disputes. The United Nations Security Council has failed the world, proving that it cannot be relied upon to preserve peace and security. The ongoing conflict has starkly exposed the inadequacy of the UN system and highlighted the need for serious attention to our repeated calls for substantive reform of the Security Council and indeed the United Nations body itself. We look closely with new non-permanent members of the Security Council to urge them to initiate a genuine, robust process of reform. We firmly believe that the Ukraine-Russia war will only be ended through negotiations, and we urge the Secretary General to lead as the key negotiator to secure a cessation of hostilities. Drawing on our experience in the past year, South Africa will give greater attention to member states of the non-aligned movement and work with them to ensure that we all actively contribute to shaping the reform deliberations within the United Nations system, as well as giving new content to the United Nations Security Council. The non-aligned movement member states have always worked hard to support multilateralism and have contributed extensively to the battles for an end to colonial oppression and abuse of multilateral institutions. Chairperson, we continue to derive great value from the BRICS partnership. Our joint call with India, a fellow BRICS member, for the World Trade Organization to temporarily suspend the intellectual property rights regulations under the TRIPS so that COVID-19 vaccines and other new technologies, treatments, and diagnostics would be accessible to developing countries was an important intervention in the fight against COVID-19. We are pleased that South Africa and India will also continue collaborating in genomic sequencing to further research COVID-19 and its mutations. We're thrilled that the virtual BRICS Vaccine Research and Development Center was launched in May this year, and that it is one of South Africa's BRICS Chairship legacy projects. We look forward to leading further progress on BRICS initiatives once more as we assume chair of BRICS in 2023. We are very heartened at the advances recorded by the BRICS New Development Bank. Last year, its membership has expanded to include Bangladesh, Egypt, Uruguay, and the United Arab Emirates. We hope to expand the membership further during our chairship in 2023. We also remain committed to championing the interests of Africa within BRICS, as the African agenda remains a cornerstone of our foreign policy. Honorable members, in terms of our priorities on the continent, we are ever mindful that there can be no development without peace and no peace without development. We had long hoped to silence the guns on our continent, but there is still much work to be done to achieve that. One of the important priorities in the AU agenda, as well as in the Secretary General of the UN's common agenda, is the maintenance of peace and the prevention of conflict worldwide. Member states have been encouraged to reshape their responses to all forms of violence and to engage in genuine peace building and conflict prevention. It is clear that much must be done to promote democracy and good governance on our continent. We welcome the efforts led by President Ramaphosa to strengthen unity and cooperation throughout Africa and plan to build on the foundation laid through our successful visits to Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Senegal last year. These are very important partners for South Africa. In August last year, South Africa assumed the rotational chair of the SADC organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation. Our chairship is focused on the challenging political and security matters of the Kingdom of Lesotho, of Mozambique, the Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as those in the Kingdom of Eswatini. President Ramaphosa's facilitation on behalf of SADC in the Kingdom of Lesotho continues, and the national reform process is at a very critical stage. The constitutional amendments have now been tabled before the Parliament of Lesotho and are under consideration to be passed before the election this year. We also continue to support the SADC deployment in Mozambique as part of our region's response to the fight against extremism and terrorism. We thank our men and women in uniform for their courageous efforts in the fight against terrorism. We welcome the establishment of the Tanzania-based Regional Counterterrorism Center in February this year. This will be an important step towards strengthening our SADC regional security architecture. We are also promoting strong humanitarian efforts on the ground in Mozambique. This involves working with other SADC member states to alleviate the plight of internally displaced persons in the Cabo Delgado region. The Mozambican government has specifically requested assistance for internally displaced families to be resettled. We plan to make a contribution to this through support for sustainable food production projects. Our efforts at promoting democracy and good governance in Eswatini are also underway. The SADC Secretariat has, through the organ Troika, prepared the terms of reference for an inclusive national dialogue in Eswatini. These terms have been submitted to the government of Eswatini and to His Majesty King Mswati III. We are hopeful that the kingdom will draw on the goodwill of SADC and convene a genuine national dialogue. We are deeply concerned, Chairperson, that there appears to be a rise in unconstitutional changes of government in other regions of our dear continent, as well as a rise in violent extremism. We believe these undermine our continent's efforts to realize a peaceful and secure Africa. We will work with the Economic Community of West African States, as well as the African Union, to combat these incidents of insecurity. Working with our partners on the continent and elsewhere, we will redouble our efforts within the AU to hold governments accountable, to build a united front against terrorism and to prevent military interventions, as well as to stop negative foreign interference on our continent. We have to combat persistent instability caused by poverty, high unemployment, and violent conflict in Africa. We believe there are massive opportunities awaiting South Africa in the promotion of African trade, African regional integration, and African industrialization. We need to draw benefit from these opportunities and have to be seen as a country that supports inclusion, that practices social cohesion, and that is a home for all who live in it. We believe if we intensify our efforts at increasing intra-African trade and at reducing imports from beyond the continent and increasing manufacturing in Africa, we will show the continent our commitment to the joint prosperity and development of Africa. It is also our hope that the free trade area implementation will result in a continental customs union robustly overseeing intra-African trade. I've been very thrilled about the progress that has been made in the ratification of the Tripartite Free Trade Area, which consists of SADC, the East African Community, and COMESA. Only 3 more states need to ratify this instrument in order for the agreement to enter into force. The Tripartite Free Trade Area has the possibility of creating a market of 29 African countries with a combined population of more than 700 million. The challenge we face as South Africa is to increase trade within the continent, beyond the SADC region, and to ensure that we take up these increasing economic opportunities, which will make us very successful regions. We've worked hard as DIRCO to coordinate South Africa's economic diplomacy on the continent and to develop a concerted, coherent approach to this. We've launched a coordination mechanism for economic diplomacy, or COMED, as a platform in South Africa, drawing government departments, the private sector, and civil society together to explore economic opportunities on the continent and coordinate our efforts for export promotion. We hope that COMED will assist in ensuring a coherent South African response to African economic opportunities. As DIRCO, we are also committed to providing humanitarian assistance as part of our global responsibility, particularly on the African continent and in countries of the South. It makes no sense to us that South Africa expects to receive grants and support from other nations of the world, and yet as South Africa, we don't wish to give to others when we can. The African Renaissance Fund was set up for the purpose of humanitarian assistance. We received requests from various partners on the continent for mitigating circumstances of extreme poverty and providing support in disaster relief. We will continue within our abilities to provide what we can to assist. We believe this is a vital obligation, and as one of the world's nations, we must honor it. We are also prepared to act in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Cuba, as we cannot turn a blind eye to their plight while their economy is strangled by illegal blockades and sanctions. The Cuban economy has been brought to its knees after 61 years of draconian US economic sanctions imposed on that impoverished island nation. This is a nation that stood shoulder to shoulder with our combatants in the struggle for freedom, and we must help if we can. It was Cubans who sent their sons and daughters to fight for the liberation of Southern Africa. Of course, those who were never in the trenches fighting for freedom cannot appreciate nor know this history. Cuba played a pivotal role in turning the tide against our colonial oppressors. It would be unjustified and unethical to turn our backs on them in the hour of their greatest need. We will also consolidate other areas of support for international solidarity. We continue to support the revolutionary causes of those who suffer under the yoke of colonial oppression. The last colony in Africa, Western Sahara, is still not free. The people of Palestine continue to struggle for human rights, dignity, and self-determination in their own land and need our support. The situation on the ground for ordinary Palestinians has become unbearable in terms of the gross violations of their human rights and dignity. We hope that all members of the United Nations will combat the infringement of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Palestine and will ensure that as the global family of the United Nations, we are equally angry at the plight of the people of Palestine, just as we are angered at the war in Ukraine. The UN Secretary General has called all of us to action for human rights, and his agenda calls for human rights for all to be placed at the center of our global and national agenda. We've also launched, Chairperson, our campaign to return to the Human Rights Council in 2023, and we are pleased the African Union has endorsed our candidature. Chairperson, we've also begun our major initiatives in advancing the legacy of Charlotte Maxege, an internationalist South African who played a major role in women and youth empowerment during her lifetime. She was one of our earliest ambassadors, a true internationalist, forging relations across the globe. And we will initiate a number of flagship programs that will honor her legacy. We are also running an international women's capacity building program through DIRCO, in which we support African women in strengthening their role in conflict resolution and post-conflict reconstruction. It's a program which invites women from all over the continent. All of this indicates our commitment to the full participation of women in advancing and maintaining peace and security in Africa. Finally, Chairperson, I'm really pleased that we could welcome our new DG, Zane Dango, and I look forward to working closely with him to advance our foreign policy agenda. I also thank the Deputy Ministers for the support and leadership that they give within the department. And I thank all members of the Portfolio Committee for the important oversight role that they play in Parliament. As the first president of our democratic South Africa, President Nelson Mandela said during the 5th Steve Biko lecture in 2004, and I quote, "One of the challenges of our time, without being moralistic, is to reinstill in the consciousness of our people that sense of human solidarity, of being in the world for one another and because of and through others," close quotes. This quotation, I believe, illustrates our own South African platform of global solidarity. And I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. The next speaker from the ANC is the Honorable S.R. Mahumapelo.
The Honorable House Chair, collective of the legislative arm of the state, the collective of the executive arm of the state, the newly appointed DG Zane Dango, and all our friends and colleagues who are watching these debates. Honorable members, one of the things about the budget is that it is a necessary political economic instrument in the hands of the International Relations and Cooperation Department to build a better Africa and a better world. The reports of the Auditor General have demonstrated a consistent upward positive trend by the department in how it wields this economic instrument called the budget to comply with the Public Finance Management Act. We commend the department under the stewardship of Honorable Minister Pando, Honorable Deputy Ministers Kenneth Mashego Dlamini and Alvin Bottas, because in the execution of their responsibilities, they have demonstrated a clear understanding that our struggle for a better Africa and a better world is pursued under conditions of neither our choice nor desire. We are pleased as a collective of progressive and vigilant agents of oversight that the department does acknowledge the need to intensify the struggle against its own weaknesses, such as ICT environment, compensation of employees, asset management, financial performance management, and many others as reported to the committee by the department. We are acutely aware of the difficult task of a constrained physical environment, which forces the department to close some of the missions. It is indeed our position as the portfolio committee that the reduction of the emissions shouldn't be applicable in Mama Africa, the continent. It is also our hope that at some point in future, the difficulties the department faces of having to work within a stipulated national treasury ceiling on matters of compensation of employees will be overcome. Linked to this matter, it is the resolve of the committee that comprehensive skills audit will have to be done by the department. This will partly contribute to the compliance of the Foreign Service Act of 2019. The department correctly assessed that its strategic plans are developed in a complex and dynamic global environment. International relations strategies are forged cognizant of country-based initiatives, the challenges and opportunities that arise from national, continental, and global relations, as well as the imperatives of global development cooperation. These require a set of strategies that position the country to effectively engage in global politics, trade, and development with the requisite capabilities to manage multi-layered relations within the global political and economic architecture. Our support for this budget, honorable
honorable member, please mute. Sorry, honorable.
Thank you very much, House Chair. Bayadanki, House Chair. Our support for this budget vote, honorable members, is in appreciation that we have played our oversight role in the budget process. This includes the observations and recommendations we made during the Budget Review Recommendations Report, BRRR. In the BRRR, we noted and commended the department for having achieved 85% of its targets in 2021-22 financial year. There are a number of recommendations made by the Portfolio Committee in the BRRR of 2021 financial year, and this includes, among others, the following: negative audit outcomes, the audit action plan, irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure, financial management and competency assessment work, and the African Renaissance Fund impact assessment. It's our call that the department must continue to attend to these particular matters. At the core of the triumph of the people's revolution in South Africa were the people themselves. That is why, as the committee, we have commenced the process of a people-centered oversight approach. Among other things, this will result in us as a committee establishing what we term People's International Relations Oversight Forums in every village, in every township, in every small dorp, and all the cities of our country, South Africa. It is also our call to the department that there must be intensification of economic diplomacy as a critical vehicle for our foreign policy. This will help South Africa triumph over the domestic challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We are comfortable with the consistent progressive role South Africa plays in global institutions of governance, such as the United Nations and its ancillary bodies. This has been demonstrated recently when South Africa adopted a position of rational mind application to achieve rational win-win outcome on the matter of NATO imperial-induced conflict between Russia and Ukraine. How South Africa consistently seeks to make all of us and globally to understand that COVID-19 emergence and subsequent responses requires nothing less than global, united, and consistent responses, financially, scientifically, and politically. This demonstrates that indeed, we are the well-nurtured sons and daughters of the ever-present among ourselves of Oliver Regional Tambo. Honorable Presiding Chair, our committee moves that we debate and finally adopt and approve the budget vote 6 of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, including the African Renaissance Fund. The essence of today's debate is not only about commitments made by the executive and the necessary ensuing oversight embedded. It is not only about stating the facts. It is also about our singular and collective capacities to struggle against our weaknesses. One of such weaknesses, honorable members, it is the inability to master the art of distilling truth from facts. Let us just state some of such facts for convenience of the mind. The ANC is an anti-Western imperialist organization, but at the same time, the ANC cooperates with some of the Western imperialist states because as the ANC, we have mastered the art of distilling truth from facts. The DA is a strategic, political, and ideological opponent of the ANC. So we must make it clear that no matter how sweetly sophisticated the DA will want to be in approaching various matters of this parliament, we would never be fooled. The misguided, populist, cheap publicity sought by Honorable Steenhuisen on behalf of his perpetually anxious DA by self-inviting himself to Poland and Ukraine recently reconfirms our analysis that you are nothing else but the most pathetic offspring of Western imperial apartheid colonialism. Our recognition and standing globally does not depend on our perpetual desire to become a relevant global political player, whilst in the process of which your actions demonstrate the extent to which you are actually unpatriotic while you pretend to be the best patriot. We are also in the middle of a very difficult situation in Eastern Europe. In this context, we affirm our support on the diplomatic stance our country took in the face of this crisis. Our principal position is the preference of negotiations to address these challenges. We are mindful that the situation in the eastern part of Europe will impact negatively on the peaceful stability of the world, as well as impact on global energy supply. We are hopeful that the negotiation process will indeed bear positive fruits in this regard. The not surprising attack by the Israeli regime on worshippers in Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, which resulted in injuries and the killing of innocent Palestinian worshippers, must be condemned by all loving people. Closer to home, the situation in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique continued to be on the agenda of SADC, in particular, the SADC organ of peace, security, and safety. We are confident that through this intervention, peace will in the end be restored in Mozambique. We also are concerned about the situation in the kingdoms of both Eswatini and Lesotho, and we fully support the measures taken by both South Africa in particular and SADC in general to bring peace and stability to our sister countries. The Portfolio Committee takes note, honorable members, of the outcome of the court in Pretoria yesterday. As the Portfolio Committee, we respect the outcome of the court on the matter of Cuban humanitarian intended contribution by South Africa. The Portfolio Committee expects that the department in dealing with this Cuban matter must deal with it in line with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, our foreign policy principles and objectives, and our historical relations with Cuba. And also the department must look at the implications of the court judgment of yesterday. It is our expectation that the department will report an account to Parliament on this matter on behalf of the people of South Africa. We will also ensure that the department in particular and the government in general focuses their energies on advancing economic diplomacy through economic integration of the continent and encouraging investment. We will also ensure that the status of South Africa is enhanced in international relations as the department is doing on behalf of the rest of us. Once more, as the committee, we move that the budget be approved by Parliament. Ke a leboga, modulasetulo se sa feleng se a tlhola.
Ra leboga ntate, ra leboga. Ntate Mapelo, thank you so much. The next person is the Honorable D. Bergman.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I must just say that anyone who doubts the efficacy of the DA leader and the fixation of the members of the chairpersons in the ANC and the ministers on our leader, he must be doing the right things. So keep on doing what you're doing, Honorable Steenhuisen. South Africa has been well represented through a proud track record in international relations and in calling out human rights abuses wherever they may occur. But this proud representation has unfortunately not been a proud national effort. This representation comes from an opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, which has sent its leaders to Zimbabwe, Zambia, Morocco, Somaliland, and the Middle East. The DA leader and his team have condemned the persecutions of the Rohingyas, the ongoing war in Cameroon, warned of the dangers of Mozambique when it was still a civil war, urged the AU for more productive action in the Tigray region, and of late even went to visit the war-torn Ukraine, after the DA had been calling since 2016 for South Africa to use its proximity to President Putin to mediate a peace process between Russia and Ukraine. That was when there was no side that was needed to be taken. The ANC has tarnished South Africa's international image by failing to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine, choosing instead to remain neutral in the face of gross human rights violations and loss of lives. The world should know that it is the ANC, not South Africa, who are supporting Putin's war in Ukraine. Worse still, for a party that claims to fight for Africa, the ANC is standing by and watching as the war in Ukraine threatens to send Africa to the brink of a food crisis. Minister, your government should be pressurizing Putin to allow the opening up of Ukraine's ports, to allow the export of grain and wheat that is currently trapped there. For once, stand up and fight for Africa before this continent is plunged into a full-blown hunger crisis. We have so many missions, yet we are held ransom by the Department of Home Affairs as to when or how we can deliver consular services. It is high time that we stop threatening these e-visas. If we cannot get the technology, we must outsource our consular services to private companies around the world, like most countries do. Not only will we be able to close down many more missions and economize on our wage bill, but our tight budget will be able to stretch to more worthy causes, such as promoting South Africa as a destination open for direct foreign investment, tourism, and we would be able to stabilize our diplomatic ship by sending career diplomats that actually represent our country favorably, rather than spending their time being chauffeured around looking for these exclusive apartments to rent or sniffing out all these red carpet opportunities. It is sad that one of the most costly departments that is affected by the currency fluctuations, which in turn can be made worse by the behavior of the ruling party, has a relatively small budget and yet still manages to spectacularly waste it without an ounce of respect to the domestic fiscal pressures. Under the DA, our foreign affairs would be focused on stimulating trade and not scaring off investment, building relationships with all mutually beneficial countries and not being paralyzed in historic loyalties, and being consistent in our human rights lobbying without fear or without favor. DA public representatives wake up every morning with a clear objective in mind, and that is to see an open opportunity society whereby we promote true reconciliation. We redress the injustices of the past. We acknowledge and embrace cultural diversity, and we protect everyone's rights and guarantee delivery and results. As Richard Haas once said, diplomacy can and will matter. Little is inevitable in international relations. That is why the DA leader and his party are still flying our flag and not an insulting, disgraceful tender of 22 million rand flag, I might add. But proudly, we fly our flag on the international stage. And I want to just thank Honorable Steenhuisen for putting himself on the front line and for putting South Africa first. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next speaker should be from the EFF, but I have not received an indication who the speaker would be.
It's myself, Chairperson Msane.
You are welcome, Honorable Msane.
Thank you very much. Chairperson, the EFF rejects Budget Vote 6 on international relations and cooperation. We do so firstly because we fundamentally disagree with the ideological negligence that seems to be guiding this department in its approach to the question of international relations. Secondly, we reject the budget for the simple reason that it is led by extremely lazy and visionless people who cannot do the bare minimum. Chairperson, our approach to international relations is deeply rooted in the timeless goal of Pan-African unity, which itself must be premised on the ultimate objective of delinking former exploitative forms of international relations to those based on the principle of equality amongst people and nations. It is for this reason that in the founding manifesto of the EFF, we say, the EFF's internationalism is premised on building solidarity and working relationships with all movements in the world that identify ideologically with anti-capitalism and anti-imperialism. In this regard, the EFF will ideologically and politically support movements that seek the economic decolonization of the African continent. The EFF will also advocate for free trade across the entire African continent with common tariffs for goods and services from country to country. The EFF will also advocate for the ultimate integration of the African continent through the erosion and eventual elimination of unnecessary borders. At the core of our foreign policy posture is the centering of the African continent and African people in almost everything we do. We therefore reject South Africa's dramatic retreat from active involvement in the advancement of the interest of the continent. The African Union, the Pan-African Parliament, the African Court of Human and People's Rights are all shells, falling far short of unifying the African continent. These institutions are failing to perform because there is no leadership amongst member states. South Africa, as one of the biggest economies in the continent, has dropped the ball, but has no idea whatsoever of what a Pan-African future ought to look like. Under your watch, we have seen the intensification of armed conflicts sponsored by Western powers in the continent. The conflict in Tigray in Ethiopia is going on unabated. And South Africa and the African Union are dead silent. The destabilization of West Africa by France has been going on for years, but there is still no coordinated effort by the continent to remove France out of the affairs of the continent. It is for this reason that the EFF will march against the involvement of France in African affairs. Africa must no longer be treated like a colony, and France must stop thinking of itself as a colonial master. There must be no foreign military bases in the continent, because these military bases are used to train rebels who then topple legitimate governments in the continent. There must be a stable government in the Democratic Republic of Congo for that country and the whole continent to benefit from the riches of this continent. We need to be more persistent in our push for a representative United Nations and do away with the veto power enjoyed by just 6 nations in the United Nations Security Council. We must be more vocal in our opposition to the genocide of Palestinian men and women and children by the apartheid state of Israel. We must publicly and privately call out the hypocrisy of the war alliance that is NATO, which is basically a military tool that the United States uses to suppress other nations. The conflict in Eastern Europe is primarily sponsored by the United States through the unjustifiable expansion of NATO towards Russian territories. There will be no resolution of the conflict in Ukraine until the US stops its greedy incursions into Russia. And if we want to see a new world order based on fairness and mutual respect, it is then our responsibility to make our voice heard on this and other matters. At a pragmatic level, this government is corrupt and visionless to the core. Millions of rands have been spent, and yet no one can account what monies have been spent on. Instead of holding officials to account, the department allows them to resign without even accounting. Chairperson, it is time for Umam Pandor to go on retirement and allow a new and vibrant leadership to take over the affairs of this department. We therefore reject this budget vote. Thank you, Chairperson.
Yeah, Commissar, decisive leadership, decisive leadership.
Honorable Co-Chair, it seems like there's no volume. I'm not too sure from my side or from everybody. If you may just deal with that, please.
We can hear you very well, House Chair.
Okay, Honorable Lusane.
Chairperson, I'm done. Thank you very much. We reject the budget vote.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The next speaker is the Honorable Shangwa. Is he there?
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson. We can spend the whole day today and any other day debating the politics, the ideology, and every other narrative that's out there not playing out on the international stage. Rightly so, South Africa must continue being present and must make its position known, and will continue disagreeing with the government. We would disagree with it. But today we are here to deal with the budget. And so maybe let us zoom in on the financial management of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. According to the Auditor General in her consultation of DIRCO's 2020-21 annual report, I quote, the department incurred unauthorized expenditure of 150 million rands, as well as irregular expenditure of 187 million rands. When reporting on expenditure management, the AG reported effective and appropriate steps were not taken to prevent irregular expenditure amounting to 19 million rands, and that the majority of the irregular expenditure was caused by payments made without approval at the appropriate level as per the delegation of authority. In addition, effective steps were not taken to prevent fruitless and wasteful expenditure amounting to 12 million rands. This is just the beginning. The AG again says they were unable to obtain sufficient audit evidence that disciplinary steps were taken against officials who had incurred irregular expenditure. The reason? Investigations into irregular expenditure were not performed. No investigations were performed into fruitless and wasteful expenditure either. Goes on, internal financial controls at DIRCO are repeatedly described as being not effective. Further blame is laid squarely at the feet of the management who did not take accountability. The AG further cited a lack of implementation of consequence management. If the findings of the AG are to be believed, as we believe them, there are serious questions to be asked and grave concerns to be raised about how DIRCO manages its finances. As a department responsible for managing an annual budget in the excess of 6.5 billion, this complete lack of internal control and consequence management is unacceptable. With the budget set to increase to 6.9 billion rands over the medium term, concerted efforts must be made to stem the tide of irregular and fruitless and wasteful expenditure. In addition, one must be made of DIRCO's campus. It was built in 2009 as a public-private partnership on a design, finance, build, and operate and transfer basis. This partnership carries a heavy cost, coming in at over 268 million for 2020-2021 alone. As the IFP, we are curious as to why DIRCO, official DIRCO documentation, lists this PPE's 25-year contract coming to an end in 2030, when Treasury states that PPP's date of close as January 2005, with 25 years taking us to 2030. Something doesn't add up, and the department must explain, and it is our concern that the taxpayer will end up footing the very large bill for these additional 4 years. Honorable House Chairperson, whatever our international endeavors might be, and our international hopes might be, and whatever international programs we want to roll out, the fundamental basis is that the department must manage its finances and its budget in a manner that is consistent with the PFMA and must make sure that officials are held accountable. They cannot have a free pass, and the situation as things stand now is of serious concern. So the minister has got her work cut out, and we hope that the new Director General understands the gravity of the situation, that things are not well. Of course, we must continue championing international peace, and we must continue championing economic diplomacy to attract international investors to ensure the creation of jobs and alleviation of poverty. We fully agree with the notion that government does not create business, but creates a conducive and enabling environment for that to happen. This means that the Department of International Relations must be able to advocate for a South Africa who has got its ducks in a row, ensuring certainty in our energy supply, and the crisis at Eskom doesn't inspire confidence. Our human rights track record must be revisited to ensure that we're continuing to conduct ourselves in a manner consistent with the Constitution and international law. We must condemn war wherever it manifests itself and uphold the principles of dialogue and peaceful resolution to conflict. All these factors combined and more are at the heart of the mandate of this department, but it cannot be achieved if financial management is inconsistent with the law. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sangwa. Oh, I'm lost. Honorable members, I'm sorry about that. The next speaker is the Honorable Dr. Melda.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, colleagues. During this debate last year, I referred to the issue dealing with Mr. David Nkosi, And colleagues may remember that Mr. Nkosi was a South African diplomat stationed in Vienna, in Austria, and he succeeded in causing damage of more than 750,000 rand in the apartment that was allocated to him, which the department leased from the private owner. At the time, the spokesperson for the department, Mr. Lunga Nkinglele, said that the matter was receiving urgent attention and investigation is underway, which will also determine liability. I want to ask the Minister today if she could indicate what action was taken in this case and if this gentleman was then adequately sued in court and was the monies repaid to the department for the loss that he caused. And I would also like to know if this gentleman's got any connection in any way still to the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Our foreign policy, Chairperson, colleagues, is based on the white paper on foreign policy that was agreed by Cabinet in 2011. It says building a better world, the diplomacy of Ubuntu, the white paper on South Africa's foreign policy 2011. And when it gets to the Middle East, it says the following: South Africa's foreign policy on the Middle East will have to take cognizance of changing and complex regional dynamics. My view is that our foreign policy is exactly not doing that. We are not taking cognizance of the changing complex and regional dynamics. There was a time during the government of President Mandela when in a discussion document on foreign policy, an international neutral position for South Africa was advocated. But slowly but surely the ideological stranglehold of ANC policy changed all that. We moved away from a policy driven by human rights to one where former allies from the Cold War would be the driving force. And thus we became the advocate for Castro, Gaddafi, Arafat, Maduro, Omar al-Bashir, and Kim Jong-un, and we heard that again today. South Africa, with our simplistic, one-eyed, pro-Palestine approach in our foreign policy solution for the Middle East, has become irrelevant. The world has moved on from a simplistic two-state solution with an emphasis of Palestine being the victim and Israel being the aggressor. The Abraham Accords, signed on the 13th of August 2020 between Israel, United Arab Emirates, the US, and Bahrain, indicates this new approach. The Arab world has moved on beyond Palestine. They are no longer going to be victims of the Palestinian internal conflict between Hamas and Fatah themselves. That agreement was signed. How does South Africa react to that breakthrough agreement in the Abraham Accords? South Africa issued a press statement on the 14th of August saying the following: the South African government has noted with concern the developments regarding the normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab United Emirates. We are concerned about that breakthrough. The current idea by some that South Africa might be asked to mediate major international disputes is a fantasy that still dreams of the past when the ANC was thought to occupy the moral high ground, when South Africa was thought of as having achieved a miraculous compromise. South Africa has squandered all of its diplomatic capital. During November 2021, we witnessed the extraordinary sight of our foreign affairs establishment getting into a rage over Miss South Africa attending an event in Israel and being successfully defied by the young woman. Well done, Lalele Mswane. Which other country's foreign office would get into a public squabble with a beauty queen and lose? Meanwhile, Israel has been hosting a meeting of Arab League foreign ministers, an event important enough to attract the attendance of the US Secretary of State. The Palestinian foreign minister said the meeting was a harsh attack against the Palestinian people, but nobody was listening to that. The foreign ministers resolved to turn that meeting into things moving on, and a new era exceeds that of the European Union, and by some margin the strongest and most successful state in the Middle East. Does our Department of International Relations even notice that? The ANC government has made a huge mistake by allowing BDS to dictate its foreign policy, a mistake which has already put it at odds with the African Union, which has granted Israel observer status despite South Africa's protests. That will just leave South Africa further and further behind in the slipstream of others. Luckily, in 2 years' time from now, with a new government, a multi-party coalition government, South Africa will once again return to a normal, acceptable foreign policy we can't wait to get to that point. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Mulder. The Honorable Member from the ACDP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson. The Honorable Minister of International Relations was passionate this afternoon as she defended her department's decision to donate 50 million rands to Cuba, while not highlighting the urgency of assisting displaced families who were devastated by the recent floods in KZN. Has DECO made any meaningful contribution to assist displaced families in our own country, or do they care or not? We know that the ANC and Cuba are ideological friends and that Cuba supported the ANC during the armed struggle. But still, we have to remember that charity begins at home. Economist David Riot noted that the donation to Cuba was irrational and unaffordable, and said that there was no rational reason for South Africa to donate 50 million rands to Cuba because Cuba's per capita income was double that of South Africa. The average Cuban's wealth, he reportedly said, is twice that of a South African's. How on earth, he said, does a poor country or poorer country give money to a richer country? This respected economist stated further that if the amount of 50 million rands was invested, it would generate 10 million rands in interest annually. We are surprised how the ANC do their calculations. Do they care for their own suffering people in our country? In a bid to hold the donation to Cuba, AfriForum took the matter to the Pretoria High Court. An urgent interdict to halt the donation was granted. And now, government, in what seems to be a desperate move, have lodged leave to appeal the decision at the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court. Does DECO expect taxpayers who are given bad service by municipalities to pay for these court cases, and at what cost? The ACDP does not support this irrational decision of the department that will result in wasted expenditure because they will not win the cases. Facts confirm that the Cuban government does not believe in freedom that the ANC government claims to promote and defend. Neither does the Cuban government believe in democracy for its people. According to the Human Rights Watch 2022 report on Cuba, I quote, "The Cuban government continues to repress and punish virtually all forms of dissent and public criticism. At the same time, Cubans continue to endure a dire economic crisis which impacts their social and economic rights." In July, thousands of Cubans took to the streets in landmark demonstrations protesting long-standing restrictions on rights, scarcity of food and medicines, and the government's response to the Cubans' COVID-19 pandemic. The government responded with brutal repression. House Chair, if the ANC loved their own people more than they hate Israel, then this country would be having a much better and stronger economy and peaceful coexistence than we have. It is hypocritical for the minister to condemn Israel while she failed to stand in solidarity with the international community when they disapproved the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Why did they refuse to stand with the international community? We believe that the...
Honorable Member, your time is up, Honorable Mishra. Honorable Relations and Cooperation, the Honorable Buates, you are the next speaker.
Honorable Chair of the Parliament's Portfolio Committee, Honorable Mopelo, Honorable Minister of Turku, Dr. Pando, Honorable Deputy Minister Masego Dlamini, and Honorable Members present. This speech today, Honorable Chair, is dedicated to the foresight and fortitude of one of the pen holders of the South African Freedom Charter, Professor Z.K. Matthews. South Africa, like all countries, face a range of conflicting pressures when making and implementing foreign policy. Balancing these diverse factors is inevitably a difficult task. The white paper on foreign policy is instructive in this regard by stating, and I quote, "The business of national interests cannot be the purview of the state alone, but it can encourage an enabling environment of dialogue and discourse among all stakeholders to interrogate policies and strategies and the application in the best interests of the people," unquote. Chair, the best interests of the South African people is international peace, and where this breaks down, internationally agreed peace mechanism to solve conflict should be resorted to. The numerous conflicts between the big powers over the last few decades are also an indicator of the mid of the end of the Cold War. These conflicts, however, took place in the territories of others, with competing former Cold War adversaries exploiting discontent in most developing countries through arming and often instigating violent conflict as they sought to cement government's support for their respective agendas. The war in Ukraine is the latest installment of big powers contesting for hegemony. That is why, Honorable Chair, it's called a proxy war. Like the war in Ukraine, much of the recent wars were illegal. This includes the invasion of Iran, of Afghanistan, of Yugoslavia, which was unilaterally done without the decision of the UN Security Council. Over the last few weeks, some of the most disturbing statements we have heard, including suggestions by European diplomats that the war in Ukraine was worse than any other wars, as it was an autocratic country invading a democratic country. The inference was that other countries were perhaps deserving of being bombed and the people suffering because their governments was not democratic. These diplomats hardly noticed the racism implicit in these statements, as most of these so-called undemocratic countries were either in Asia, the Middle East, or Africa. We need to therefore unequivocally restate South Africa's foreign policy imperatives, particularly multilateralism and the centrality of the transformation of global governance institutions, with specific reference to the UN Security Council that has the pertinent and express mandate on peace and security. The African Common Agenda position, as encapsulated in the Surti Declaration and the Isolweni Consensus, is an essential reference point as South Africa seeks to enrich the UN Secretary General's Guterres Common Agenda entitled "The UN We Want." We must therefore continue to be firm on our foreign policy principles, and we must be mindful, Chairperson, that we are born out of a nation which was beholden to conflict, and we must be the vanguard of our Freedom Charter, which states that there must be peace and friendship. We must remain non-aligned in conflicts, urging the application of peace diplomacy as the most potent instrument in conflict resolution. Ukraine's bilateral relations with South Africa is 30 years old, and we value this significant member of the UN community of states, including appreciating her rights to territorial integrity as a sovereign state. Russia is an esteemed member of the UN Security Council P5, and therefore has a special responsibility to maintain world peace and security. It is for this reason that President Ramaphosa has called for the return to mediation and negotiations. We equally value the views expressed by French President Emmanuel Macron, who also holds the EU presidency, who have pointed out that the 2015 Minsk agreement between Kyiv and Moscow is the blueprint for a breakthrough in the Ukraine crisis. However, Chair, there is also domestic issues that have international implication and demand that we use our foreign relations in order to address domestic issues. An important responsibility, as the PC chair have earlier pointed out, is to have a systematic focus on economic diplomacy. The 4th South African Presidential Investment Conference took place on the 24th of March 2022, with announcements of 366 billion rand in new investments. Our strategic bilateral relations with the United States of America is being fortified through the US improved foreign direct investment in South Africa stock, which currently stands at 116 billion rand in 2019, an increase of 6.8%, Honorable Chair, from 2018. We therefore look forward to the formal announcement of the Biden administration's Africa strategy, including information on US support for the African Continental Free Trade Area and the anticipated US-Africa Summit to be hosted by President Biden. Honorable Chair, the current investment stock from Europe is estimated at 1.4 trillion rand, which presents approximately 77% of total FDIs in the country. It has made significant contribution towards job creation in South Africa and industrialization through more than 2,000 European countries operating in South Africa, creating significant employment opportunities for our people. The EU is indeed South Africa's biggest trading partner, constituting 21% of our entire trade. And South Africa is the only country in Africa and only 1 out of 10 in the world which has a strategic partnership with the EU. Honorable Chairperson, our relationship with the Nordic region continues to deliver excellent results, in particular with a heightened and renewed focus on the green economy. We have equally noted with elation more than 20 billion rand of new investments announced from the Nordic regions during the period 2021-2022. Honorable Chairperson, we are committed to strengthen a comprehensive engagement with Latin America and the Caribbean. This includes, Chairperson, our ethos to recalibrate our South-to-South cooperation in pursuit of our national priorities, including standing in steadfast solidarity with the people of Cuba and Venezuela. Nelson Mandela have once reminded us, Chairperson, and I quote, that we must admire the sacrifices of the Cuban people in maintaining their independence and sovereignty, unquote. We thus urge the US to reconsider the extraterritorial sanctions leveled against the people of Fidel Castro. We further urge the US to support the Oslo dialogue process, which is aimed to bring about unity between the government of Venezuela and opposition group. Honorable Chairperson, I wish to express my deep appreciation for the stewardship role which Dr. Pandor has played as a Minister of DIRCO and for the cordial working relationship between myself and dear Masego Dlamini. On the occasion of the 54th commemoration of the death of Zachariah Kirodileng Z.K. Matthews, we pledge to remain firmly non-aligned and that will continue to be the vanguard of the Freedom Charter's peace and friendship ideals. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Minister. I now hand over to the Honorable Lisuma.
Thank you very much, Ntate Ntombela. And we now will proceed to Honorable UDM. We don't have a name. Honorable UDM. They seems not to be here. We'll proceed, honorable members. I recognize the Honorable Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Mashego Dlamini. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable Mahuma Pilu, Minister of the International Relations and Cooperation Department, Minister Pandor, Honorable Waters, the Deputy Minister of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, members of the executive, honorable members, guests joining us today. As the world continues to grapple with the scourge of the COVID-19 pandemic, governments around the world have had to confront dwindling budgets and do more with less. South Africa is no exception, as we have had to divert significant resources to combating the pandemic, which has translated into slash budget across the board. This has made it particularly difficult to deliver on our mandate. The work expected of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation has increased substantially over the past years as economic diplomacy has become a critical priority if we are to achieve our domestic objectives and stimulate economic growth in our country. Our missions abroad have been expected to undertake a substantial increase in trade and economic activities at the same time as their budget allocations have been decreasing. There are limited budget to host trades or tourism seminars or events at our missions abroad, and our diplomats are having to come up with innovative ways of selling South Africa and our brand. What we need to do, given the current constraints, is to further develop digital diplomacy to implement budgetary saving and raise the effectiveness of South Africa in the international arena at a reduced cost. We commend our diplomats for their fortitude and commitment despite these challenging circumstances, and we hope that over time our budget allocation will improve so that we can more effectively carry out our mandate. One of the most serious consequences of our severe budgetary constraints has been the inability to fill senior management position at head office, and there are unfilled positions at the chief director and DDG level, which places inordinate pressure
I have posted
on
to
the
Comrade Flory that I
on the
suggest
remaining
to
senior
both chairs,
management.
co-chairs, to say I'm suggesting to have a study group tomorrow morning at 8 because the ad hoc committee is scheduled for 9 o'clock.
And the Suma, you are not.
There's a
Yeah,
person
just,
All
yeah,
chairperson
I
is so
posted in the group the notice of the
Chairperson, the
committee.
former.
But if you can
The Suma, you are not.
send the
Chair,
communique
the
individually about the study
chairperson
group.
of the whole session is disruptive.
Yeah, because they might miss that.
Mr.
For 8
Suma,
o'clock.
Honorable Suma.
So disruptive, a whole chairperson.
Chairperson, you have taken my time. I think you will add some things here. Chief directors are critical posts in the department as they not only manage our mission within the particular region, but they interface with ambassadors posted to South Africa in strengthening our bilateral relations. We urgently need to fill a number of these posts, but we currently do not have the budget available to do so. These are challenges that need to be urgently addressed so that DECO is given the means to perform optimally and will be requisite and with the requisite skills and experienced personnel. The filling of vacancies in missions has also been delayed and done in a staggered manner, with only critical vacancies being filled. Unfortunately, the department has also not been able. I'm disrupted, Chair.
My apology, Honorable DM, I think it was me and I would like to apologize, but you may proceed. Thank you very much, Honorable members.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, the department has also not been able to implement cost of living adjustment for locally recruited personnel in our mission abroad for the past 3 years, and in some missions for more than 5 years, due to the shortfall in the compensation of employees' budget. This has negatively impacted on the moral and service delivery of local recruited personnel, many of whom have been working in our missions for many years and are exceptionally loyal to South Africa and what we want to achieve in the country. What is perhaps the most concerning development is that while the compensation of employees ceiling increased from 2.852 billion rand in 2022 to 2.859 billion rand in 2023 represent a 0.27% increase. It is not sufficient to cover the existing salary bill and filling position in the department, as well as vacant critical posts in the department has never faced such a dire financial situation, and we'll need to address this with the Treasurer and the DPSA in order to chart the way forward. The projected shortfall of the compensation of employees for 2022-23 financial year is 128 million rand. The shortfall obviously impacts negatively on the human resource processes. In an attempt to manage the shortfall, all posts becoming unfunded once they become vacant. This has serious implication in terms of the capacity in the department and the ability to maintain a professional foreign service. Currently, only critical and specialized posts are being identified and advertised in a staggered manner. Approximately 58% of DECO's budget is allocated towards a bilateral and multilateral engagement, and 12% has been allocated towards membership fees to international organizations. The department's allocation of 166 million rand on the payment of capital assets increased from 156 million rand, which is an average of 6.1%. This will allow the department to make more effort in ensuring that all state-owned properties are utilized optimally. To this extent, a plan has been developed to initiate the processes for feasibility studies and design for the construction of the prioritized state-owned properties. We have also prioritized the implementation of major refurbishment projects for which we will conduct conditional assessment to obtain recommendations for renovations in order to improve the state of the department's property portfolio. Over the medium-term period, the department has been allocated 796 million rand for the foreign property management portfolio, which consists of 127 state-owned properties abroad. The focus in 2022-23 will be on accelerated property renovations, repair, and maintenance. The works will be informed by the outcomes of the condition assessment on the state-owned properties performed by those in Africa, followed by those in Europe, and then those in the Americas and Asia. Furthermore, the department's plan to build 3 properties on state-owned land over the MTN period in Luanda, Angola, in New Delhi, India, and in Gaborone, Botswana, to reduce the rental portfolio. In addition, 18 superfluous properties have been identified for disposal. In reorganizing the property and facility management unit, the department has employed a chief director and a director with relevant qualification and skills. In terms of the department's audit action plan, despite the noticeable progress made in 2021-22 with the implementation of the plan, the department is continuing to promote the culture of compliance with relevant financial legislation. In the 2022-23 financial year, the department has developed a roadmap to a clean audit, which we intend to implement. The audit action plan will focus on addressing the root cause of the findings as per the recommendation of the Auditor General. This monitoring of the adequate and effectiveness of the controls implemented in addressing the root cause will be done by the Audit Steering Committee, the Audit Committee, and the National Treasury. In terms of the other areas of our work, which is primarily focused on our relations with Asia, the Middle East, and Africa, our engagement with these regions is focused on capitalize on the immense opportunities that exist for growing trade and investment, given their significant consumer markets. We are looking to exploit these opportunities through structural bilateral mechanisms and joint trade committees. South Africa's total trade with the regions amounts to approximately 1.2 trillion rand last year. With some notable exceptions, our concern is the widening trade deficit with the region. Our relations with the People's Republic of China has reached a new height, and in a significant development earlier this year, our 2 countries signed a new 10-year strategic program on cooperation 2020-2029, covering a wide range of bilateral fields with the intention of benefiting both countries. China remains South Africa's largest global trade partner in terms of total value of bilateral trade, increasing from less than 1 billion of trade in 1998 when diplomatic relations commenced, and to 544 billion rand in two-way trade last year. Total bilateral trade has grown exponentially. While the trade balance was heavily skewed in China's favor for years, the trend over the last few years has been that South Africa's negative trade balance is shrinking. Last year, it shrank to 49.9 billion rand, implying that South Africa's trade deficit with China decreased by 4 billion rand from 453.5 billion rand. It is encouraging that trade between South Africa and India has continued to grow despite the COVID-19 pandemic, that the total trade has overtaken pre-pandemic levels. The growth amid and worldwide pandemic is evidence of the strategic value of the bilateral relation.
Honorable Deputy Minister, your time is up. My apology. I did give you 1 minute extra because of the interruption that I caused.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Now I recognize Honorable Chetty.
Greetings and salutations, Honorable Speaker, Minister, Deputy Ministers, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans. In the absence of ANC leadership and its vacuum, continue to show leadership to South Africans John Steenhuisen. Steenhuisen is alive, Honorable Supra. Minister Pandor, a year has gone by and still the shenanigans of the infamous 118 million rand New York pilot project haunts us. You came to this very house, grudgingly conceding that the DA in our investigations that South Africa was swindled and has nothing to show for the 118 million rand squandered. No land, no building, no title deed, and not even a piece of paper to say we own anything. You promised that action will be taken and money is recovered from those found guilty, with criminal charges to follow. To date, it's only the former DG, Mohai, who was made the scapegoat and used as the fall guy to protect highly connected comrades, and the male culprit, former CFO Ramashu, who were both fired, while Mrs. Bernice Africa, a senior official responsible for property management, very conveniently resigned while on suspension. Minister, can you inform this House whether there are any plans to recover the 180 million rand from those officials who have been found guilty and dismissed? While on the same subject of accountability, can the Minister also inform this House if she will ask the President to take action and hold former ministers of her department, Minister Nkwana Mashabani and Minister Lindy Besulu, together with former DG Ambassador Jerry Majila, accountable for allowing this 180 million rand swindle to take place under their watch? We are well aware that you have always hidden behind the excuse that holding the aforementioned comrades of yours to account does not fall within your mandate or even your pay grade. But surely, in the interest of accountability to all South Africans who you claim to represent, you can make this urgent request to the President to consider taking the appropriate action against these three errant comrades. Minister, a similar scenario is going to play itself out in Namibia, this time under your watch, where we have 20 properties that are earmarked for either refurbishment, renovations, or even to be sold. I must hasten to add that the redeployment of the High Commissioner, Archie Whitehead, from Namibia to the Central African Republic has the signs of another scandal relating to property misappropriations that this department can ill afford. The delay in the processing of the Foreign Service Bill seems to be deliberate, designed to give an opportunity to the next deployee to Namibia to oversee these multi-million rand transactions, even as some unscrupulous traders are already circling like vultures to get their dirty paws on these transactions. We will be watching the appointment very closely, Minister, to see who heads off to Namibia, as the timing seems very opportunistic. Minister, despite the current plight of South Africans who are facing starvation due to the rising food prices, your department saw it fit to challenge the 50 million rand donation to Cuba ruling. The fact that the department lost this challenge on Tuesday in court, and your ANC cronies in the portfolio committee still want to pursue avenues to continue with this aid, speaks volumes for the respect for the rule of law by your ANC. Believe me, the audacity and arrogance displayed by the department in the face of the recent floods in KZN and the Eastern Cape isn't wasted on those impoverished citizens. You should advise your department, who miraculously made a very sober decision to condemn Russia's invasion of the Ukraine and calling on Russia to withdraw its troops, that it is time for yet another sober decision, this time to place the interests of our impoverished citizens ahead of that of Cuba. For far too long, this ANC government has taken our long-suffering citizens for granted. The chickens have finally come home to roost, and this ANC will pay dearly for the arrogant abuse of taxpayers' money. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Mpanza. Honorable Mpanza, over to you, sir.
No, thank you, Chair. Can I request that I don't show my video because of network challenges?
Permission granted.
Thanks very much, House Chair. There are three major events in the last 3 years that have disrupted our national drive to grow the economy.
Honorable Mpanza, you seem to have a serious
This
challenge.
was from of COVID-19 pandemic. The world impact of the pandemic. The reference to the... Can I...
Honorable
Just hold
Mpanza
on.
can just sort your thought for 1 second.
Okay.
You should be better now.
It should be better now. Okay,
Yes.
thanks,
You may
Chairperson.
proceed.
So the world is yet to recover fully on the economic front from the impact of the pandemic. The reference to the context that our economy is interconnected event is the July unrest, which has resulted with serious damage to infrastructure, the looting, and the unrest. The third is the recent devastating floods experienced in KZN Natal, the Eastern Cape, and parts of the Northwest Province. We send our heartfelt condolences to the families that lost their loved ones, and we are confident that government will lead the recovery measures to return our people back to normal lives. All these events had a serious impact on our fiscus. The government had to table more than one special appropriations to respond to this crisis. There is likelihood that another special appropriation may be tabled to respond to the devastations caused by the floods in KZN, Eastern Cape, and Northwest provinces. So the budget of the Department of International Relations and Cooperations, as well as other budget votes, takes place within the social and economic circumstances we outlined earlier. The situation of COVID, of July unrest, and of floods. The main focus for the department in this financial year is on the economic diplomacy as reflected in the budget allocations under the Program of International Relations. There is a slight increase in the budget allocations for this program by 1.3%, given that economic diplomacy is one of the focus areas for the financial year. This is consistent with what we outline as policy priorities for the government for this year as the ANC, that it is vital to improve competitiveness of exports from this continent and increase intra-country trade. As such, there is a need to accelerate African industrializations to enable sustainable and inclusive regional trade and investment. This is a continuous work of the AU agenda of 2016 of the continent through the South African Heads of Missions Conference in April 22, the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation said, a quote, if we are to achieve our national poverty unemployment in South Africa, it is the job of our heads of missions to champion the message that South Africa is open for business. Economic diplomacy must drive the work of our missions, and it cannot be a mere rhetoric. It is for investment and trade. Close quote. The directive by the minister follows on the injunction made by the president to the same conference of heads of missions when he opened
Honorable Panza. Honorable Panza. Honorable Panza. Honorable Panza, can't you get one of your colleagues to finish up your presentation, your engagement? You seem to have a hectic connectivity challenge. Honorable Panza, we have totally lost
the political, economic, and social. Yes, Chair. Please. Hey,
I think take my advice, it will work.
Okay, Chair, can I ask another one to carry on? Plus, yeah, I'm having a serious challenge inside.
We can, anyone from the ANC to assist Honorable Panza for the few minutes that he's left with? If there is no one, then honorable members, we shall proceed. And I'm sure the
House Chair, I suggest you give that 2 minutes to Honorable Benny Swartz of the ANC. She's about to follow.
Okay, we are assisting. Thank you, Honorable Portfolio Chair. I was just about to say that, honorable members, let's proceed. On that note, now I recognize Honorable Cope. Honorable Cope. We shall proceed. I recognize Honorable PAC. PAC. We shall proceed, honorable members. I recognize Honorable Hendricks.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Honorable House Chair, Al-Jamaa stands with the Minister of International Relations, the Honorable Naledi Pandor. There is renewed fire from our Minister, her deputies, and the Chair of the Portfolio Committee to make the Sixth Parliament proud. Al-Jamaa supports the budget. Dirko and the Chair of the Portfolio Committee has come out strongly against Muslim worshippers being pulled out of prayer lines while prostrating to God, and the assassination of an American journalist of Al Jazeera, Shireen Abu Akleh. Dirko has acted swiftly to condemn this. We must remember the Nakba on Saturday the 15th May 2022 if we want to honor the journalist that has been mowed down. Dirko has let down Muslim pilgrims over the past 10 years by giving an NGO a mandate to sign agreements with the Hajj Ministry in Saudi Arabia, usurping the powers of the President of South Africa.
Honorable Hendricks, my apologies, there's a hand. Honorable Khatib with an R. Yeah, I noticed on the board here, your hand is up.
No, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson of the session. I think today it is not our farewell speeches. We are not allowed to wear our hats during the normal sittings of the House. Please, can you look at that? Thank you, Chair. I know that Honorable Hendricks is going to speak well, but just for the sake of the decorum of the House.
Thank you very much, Honorable Khatib. Honorable Hendricks, if you may. And then
thank you, Honorable House Chair, and thank you for the interruption by the ANC. Dirko has let down Muslim pilgrims over the past 10 years by giving an NGO a mandate to sign agreements with the Hajj Ministry in Saudi Arabia, usurping the powers of the President of South Africa and in violation of the Constitution, ignoring Parliament. The Minister Naledi has noted that this NGO is out of favor and looking for new solutions. The appointment of a new Director General, more sensitive to the plight of Muslim women, gives hope for the future. The waiting list has increased to 40,000. It cannot be that only 1,000 South Africans allowed to perform the Hajj, while President Mandela fought for and got 10,000 visas. Muslim women raise expenses for the Hajj by selling from their kitchen. Women outside the Muslim community must stand with Muslim women. The official opposition can hardly be expected to do so. Honorable House Chair, Al-Jamaa supports this budget, and we wish the new Director General and the energized ministerial team everything of the best to make the Sixth Parliament proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Sheikh Imam. Honorable Sheikh Imam, over to you, sir. Honorable members, we shall proceed. I recognize Honorable Faba. Honorable Faba of the DA.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. The vision and mission of DIRCO, in short, is the champion of an African continent, which is prosperous, peaceful, democratic, and by this to manage South Africa's national interest. DIRCO should play a dynamic role in the improvement of lives of South Africans by utilizing its bilateral relations and global footprint effectively and profitably. Now, let's start with the ARF, the African Renaissance Funds. President Mbeki initiated the African Renaissance Funds for economical regeneration of the African continent by providing humanitarian assistance to struggling African countries. During the last decade, this fund became the open wallet for the government to distribute funds anywhere as per the executive's decision. Again, I have to stress first that Cuba is not situated in Africa, but the only non-African country lucratively supported by the African Renaissance Fund for many years by this ANC government. We see that the African continent continued to experience an increase of natural disasters through climate change, as recently seen in KwaZulu-Natal. Through the ARF, the government should help restore human dignity to bring relief to people living in distress when these humanitarian situations arise. The ARF fund should be used to create sustainable food production to enhance food security, especially now with the Russian war in Ukraine hitting an already struggling South Africa with COVID, and now the war in Ukraine that this ANC government don't want to condemn. South Africans find it hard to stay afloat. Minister, charity begins at home, but this ANC government decided rather to donate to Cuba. Deputy Minister Botha in the Portfolio Committee said that South Africa will be donating 50 million from the ARF to Cuba for food security purposes because of the extraterritorial sanctions being promulgated by the US against Cuba, which is absolutely nonsense. The US embargo does not block food and medicine goods to Cuba from the United States. Exports of food products and agricultural commodities from the US actually increased with 44.5% in 2021 to $29.8 million US, Minister. With a South Africa that is already economically on its knees, please forget about your party alliances and think of the millions of poor South Africans who is looking up to this government to make the right calls to help them in their hour in need. And in conclusion, Minister, I would like you to note that if South Africa is implicitly choosing Russia and its political allies in an economic war, it will choose 16 billion rand over $1 trillion in trade from NATO countries. Finally, I want us to be very clear. The DA leader, Honorable John Steenhuisen, don't need the permission of the ANC to visit any country. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Now I recognize Honorable Swart. You've got 12 minutes, ma'am. Over to you.
Honorable Chair of the session, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister of International Relations, Honorable members, the Department's annual performance plan is underpinned by an updated situational analysis that presents South Africa's foreign policy vision aimed at achieving an African continent that is peaceful, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, united and prosperous, and which contributes to a world that is just and equitable. Thus, taken into consideration, a reality that acknowledges that successful implementation of foreign policy is, of course, directly impacted by developments in the global environment, notably the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been with us for almost 2 years to date. The pandemic has had a severe impact on most socio-economic activities locally and globally, characterized by a reduction in global trade, including manufacturing and transportation, an increase in unemployment, devastation of the tourism, hospitality, entertainment, and sporting industries, and education on all levels has been widely disrupted. Recent studies are showing that it is estimated that the pandemic has pushed back the attainment of the 2020 SDGs for less developed economies by almost a decade. One important realization of the department is that while the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the need for greater international cooperation to address global challenges, especially for developing countries, the economic and social impact of the pandemic has constrained the ability of many governments to make greater financial commitments to areas such as peacekeeping and developmental issues, given that the domestic recovery plans take priority. The repercussion has impacted negatively on future funding for peacekeeping on the continent and also on support for AU and UN goals such as Agenda 2063 and the SDG 2030. Despite all the odds militating against our country's mandate of discharging its foreign policy for a better Africa and a better world, our government, under the leadership of President Ramaphosa and guided by our diplomacy of Ubuntu, has played a cardinal point in contributing to the resolution of conflict, especially in the continent. On the reform of the UN, South Africa's engagement with the UN is based on its commitment to promote an equitable rules-based multilateral system and is informed by the recognition that the UN does not reflect current global political economic realities. A key priority in South Africa's engagement with the UN is to advance the reform of the existing global governance architecture with a view to improving the voice and representation of Africa and the developing world, as well as the responsiveness of the UN system to the needs of the challenges faced by Africa and developing states. We have no doubt that South Africa will remain relevant in its endeavor to influence the institutional reform of the UN, with special attention to the reform of the UN Security Council. It is our contention that the reform of the UN should be more prominent during this period when the world body has proven that it is unable to provide critical intervention in the conflict in the Eastern Europe. We have argued for many years that the status quo in the UN Security Council has not been effective in bringing peace and stability in the world. The veto right of the permanent members of the UNSC has been used to advance narrow interests of countries in the UNSC as opposed to advancing peace for all. Our country has provided diplomatic support to its sisters peoples of the Democratic Republic of Congo through the Congolese dialogue to find peaceful resolution to the conflict that has inflicted DRC for many years. Just to mention but a few of our country have registered achievement in a number of ways in recent years. We have also had to continue to provide support to the consolidation of peace efforts in South Sudan and Sudan. We are part of SADC mediation process in the Kingdom of Lesotho, and we are hopeful that peace and stability will be achieved in Lesotho. We are highlighting these milestones which our people and the continent have achieved, not to bask in the glory of the past, but to look back in order to go forward. We are encouraged that SADC has extended intervention in Cabo Delgado, Mozambique. We are confident that peace will be restored in Mozambique. We support the mediation efforts through SADC in the Kingdom of Lesotho and are hopeful that the coming elections in Lesotho will solidify the peace efforts. In the same vein, we are glad that our government and SADC are seized with the matter of the situation in the Kingdom of Eswatini. signs are that people of Eswatini will find one another through an inclusive dialogue. We affirm our support for the budget vote 6 of the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, as the chair of the Portfolio Committee has represented us. Think tanks, especially academic and research institutions in the field of international relations, should continue to play their part and thus contribute to the shaping and advancement of our foreign policy. Through our country's membership and participation in the African Union and SADC, we should ensure that together with the rest of the member states of the AU and advance the Agenda 2063 of Africa to build the Africa we want. We all agree that economic development can only happen in an environment of peace and stability. This therefore means we should support all efforts by the AU to resolve conflicts of the continent to ensure peace and stability. We commend the role played by South Africa in leading the Western Sahara Support Group in Geneva, which is very effective on human rights. This affirms that our solidarity with Polisario Front and the people of Western Sahara remains unwavering. The plight of the people of Palestine remains our plight. We remain firm on the words of President Nelson Mandela, that when he said that we cannot be free until the people of Palestine are free. The terror which continues to be visited upon the people of Palestine by the brutal regime of Israel requires that we should double our efforts in solidarity with Palestine. South Africa should strengthen its work in advancing South-South cooperation, its trade relations with various countries, especially in regions of East Asia, South America, and Latin America. House Chair, Honorable Bergman, you missed an opportunity in that you misunderstood the dynamics of diplomacy in the sense that South Africa can only use its soft power to bring peace rather than what you think South Africa should have done. I know that every one of us understands hard power and that soft power, to educate you, is Honorable Bergman, is that for us, it is appropriate that we deploy soft power because soft power is a panacea, because we cannot use hard power in relation to the current military conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We cannot add fuel by ignoring the root causes of conflict. The Honorable Sane of the EFF, it is regrettable that the EFF has once again failed to use the opportunity to contribute to the robust oversight. And instead, what you decided to do—
the opportunity to read your speech.
Is that—
Aibo, you are out of order. Point of order. Point of order. You can't just open your mic.
You are out of order. You
can, Judith. I'm raising point of order.
You can.
I'm raising point of order.
Oh, chairperson, where now chairperson when
IT front table, may you just remove all the members that are having their mics on without being recognized, please. Otherwise, we'll have a drama here.
Not remove when you had your mic on.
Honorable Swift,
continue. Chair, when you had your mic on.
It is regrettable that the EFF has once again failed to use the opportunity to contribute to the robust oversight, and instead, what it has done, it is again not supported the vote. At the same time, they are not supporting the vote, but they want to fix the world. Also, Honorable Msane, there is no old lady that must resign. There is an Honorable Minister of International Relations who is Honorable Dr. Naledi Pandor, and not an old lady that must resign.
On a point of order, Honorable Minor. On a point of order.
No, I hear you. I'm recognizing you, followed by Honorable Khatebe as well. I recognize you, Honorable Ntlangwini.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair.
Let's hear your point.
Yeah, just to alert you, Honorable Chair, the Honorable Naledi Pandor is of old of age. So to say that she's old, then there is a no It's not going to change. If she's old, she's old.
Honorable Tlangweni, that's
She's
a point
over
of debate
60,
for now.
she's old.
No, that's Honorable Tlangweni, that's not a point of order. That's a point of debate. Honorable Khatib.
Oh, debate.
No,
Your hand is up on the platform.
No, thank you, Chairperson.
What are you debating? She's old.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Honorable members.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Continue, Honorable Khatib.
I think that Honorable Tlangweni is moving on a thin ice here, skating on the thin ice. Our constitution is very clear that we cannot have discrimination in this country. So we cannot have discrimination because of age. There's no law in this country which provides that a person must be in parliament for until a certain age. So I think it is wrong. I think that we must roll around that, Chair. And then number two, you made a ruling that the people who were disrupting must be removed from the platform and they are still participating. I think that you must respect the decisions you have taken. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Khatib. We'll make a ruling at the end, Honorable Tlangweni's statements. Honorable Swart, you may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, House Chair. The recent litigation by AfriForum against our country's humanitarian assistance to Cuba is a clear indication that some in our society have no appreciation of the importance of the ethos of the diplomacy of Ubuntu that South Africa is to be known of. We need to educate our citizens about the importance of international solidarity and how that can contribute to global peace. I thank you, House Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And now I recognize the Honorable Minister, Dr. Pando. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I wish to begin by thanking those honorable members that have made a useful contribution to the debate for their contributions. As for the rest, let's leave it where it is. Chairperson, I wish to reiterate that as South Africa's Department of International Relations, we remain committed to promotion of human rights and justice for all people and to the creation of a better South Africa, Africa, and world. Examining the role that we play in the global community, one would be able to clearly identify our contribution to each of these three goals in the work that we do. We also affirm our international solidarity with all the oppressed and marginalized of this world, such as the people of Palestine, the people of Western Sahara, the people suffering as victims of terrorism in the Sahel region, and all people who suffer under oppression. We believe it is absolutely correct for the people of South Africa to hold up the rights of all who are oppressed, because we ourselves benefited from significant international support and solidarity and enjoy today's freedom because others stood shoulder to shoulder with us throughout the global community. And thus, unlike Reverend Meshwa, we cannot desert those who are suffering. We cannot desert those who are oppressed. And of course, we will refer to Palestine because those are the people that need our support. Those are the people who are held down. Those are the people who do not enjoy human rights. So it is vital that as South Africans, we do acknowledge the need to support them and to call for an end to their status of oppression. With respect to the queries about Vienna, a settlement was reached with the landlord in Vienna and payment was made by the department to the landlord. Efforts are underway to recover the funding from the official who caused this expenditure. With respect to the New York debacle, court action, as the Honorable Chetty is well aware, is underway to recover the funds. The publicity-seeking efforts of the Democratic Alliance, the Desperate Alliance, with the visit of their leader to Ukraine, funded by the very rich Brentis Foundation, will not bring an end to the war. Our call for diplomacy and negotiations, we believe, is the only likely route to peace. And in the end, this will be settled through diplomacy and negotiations. Chairperson, our country has supported significant peace and development efforts throughout the African continent, and we continue to play a role in South Sudan, in the DRC, in Sudan today, in Mozambique, in Lesotho, and many other areas where we bring our experience of securing a peaceful outcome to play in helping our fellow brothers and sisters on the continent to achieve similar settlements. We will also focus on UN reform, as I have indicated, and I hope our parliament will work closely with other parliaments to insist on reform of the United Nations and to add its voice to ensuring that the UN is reformed. We, of course, are committed to hosting of the Pan-African Parliament and have called on the African Union to oversee a plenary sitting where a proper election of its office bearers would take place at the PAP host headquarters in South Africa, and we hope that will happen soon. We agree with the Honorable Faber of the Democratic Alliance that we should improve the lives of the people of Africa, and we're working hard to do this, including implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. We do not use the ARF funds as an open wallet. This is totally not true. There's no 50 million rand that will be given or donated to Cuba. We plan to provide humanitarian aid to Cuba of food and medical supplies, which will be purchased from South African companies and shipped to Cuba to support that nation in its suffering. Finally, I believe it is critical to say to the Honorable Al-Jamar leader that we did not select the body that currently administers pilgrims. It was an agreement between various Muslim organizations which met at what was then Foreign Affairs several years ago. I know that various members of that organization have fallen out and there's now a conflict between them. But this is not as a result of DIRCO. It is a result of them falling out and not being able to manage the role that they had previously agreed to undertake. We, Chairperson, call for an end to the war in Ukraine because war does not benefit anyone. And of course, we are worried about the impact on all our economies, but we believe that what we must do as South Africa is choose peace, is advocate for peace, is draw all the parties together to have a settlement that brings peace and security for both Ukraine and Russia. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Dr. Pando. Honorable members, I would like to caution all of us that when we engage or we interject a member or we raise point of orders, whatever point we're raising, it shouldn't then amount to discrimination based on age. We must avoid that one by all means. Honorable members, we are all reminded that the debates on agricultural land and rural development budget vote, Office of the Chief Justice budget vote, and Public Service and Administration, National School of Government, and Public Service Commission budget vote will take place at 16:30 on the visual platform, which is already open now as we speak. Honorable members, that concludes the debate and the business of this virtual mini plenary session. The mini plenary will rise. Thank you.
Long live the chair.